Welcome to Money Law. I am Professor Coinstein, and today we are talking about something that every empire in history has in common. No matter how powerful, no matter how glorious, no matter how rich, they all went broke before they fell. Sounds dramatic. Oh, it is! Because behind every crumbling statue, every fallen flag, there is always a financial crisis whispering, "You spent too much." Let us rewind. Picture ancient Rome at its peak. Gold everywhere, wine-flowing soldiers marching in perfect lines. The empire covers 3 continents. But here is the twist. By the 3rd century, Rome is basically drowning in debt. Prices rise 1,000% in less than 50 years. A loaf of bread that once cost 1 denarius now costs hundreds. Why? Because the emperors could not stop printing money, or rather, debasing it. Roman coins started out 98% silver. By the time of Emperor Gallienus, it was 2%. The rest was cheap metal. Imagine paying for a Tesla with chocolate coins. That was Roman money by the end. When soldiers started refusing their pay, the empire did what modern governments sometimes do: blame someone else. The Christians, the barbarians, the traders, but the truth: the empire was bankrupt long before the Goths ever arrived. Now let us jump forward a few centuries. The Spanish Empire, 1500 S. The richest nation on earth, gold and silver flooding in from the Americas. Between 1500 and 1600, Spain imported an estimated 180 tons of gold and 16,000 tons of silver. That should have made them unstoppable. But instead, it made them broke. It is called the Spanish Price Revolution. Too much silver meant inflation. Prices across Europe quadrupled. Spanish coins bought less and less, while other countries, like the Dutch, built smart trading empires with that same silver. Spain spent its fortune on endless wars, against France, against England, against rebels in the Netherlands. By 1607, Spain had defaulted on its debt for the 3rd time. Imagine being the richest guy at the casino, and still walking out broke. Meanwhile, in the East, the Ming dynasty in China was facing its own money meltdown. In the 1300s, China actually invented paper money, way ahead of Europe. But by the 1440s, hyperinflation hit so hard that people stopped accepting cash entirely. Records show that one note worth 1,000 copper coins could not even buy a single bowl of rice, so people went back to silver, and when silver imports from the Americas slowed down in the 1600s, the Chinese economy cracked. Famine, rebellion, and boom! The dynasty collapsed in 1644. Once again, the empire fell only after the money failed. Fast forward to the 1700s, France. King Louis XIV, the Sunday King, builds Versailles, the most expensive palace in Europe. The place had 700 rooms, 2,000 windows, and cost over $2 billion in today's money. But by the time his great-grandson Louis XVI takes over, France is buried under debt. Half of the government's income goes just to pay interest. Then comes the American Revolution. France decides to help the Americans fight Britain, spending another 1.3 billion livres. By 1789, France is broke. The people are starving, and surprise, the revolution begins. If TikTok had existed back then, "Let them eat cake" would have been the most downvoted post in history. But wait, maybe it is just the old empires, right? Maybe modern nations are smarter. Let us check in 1914, right before World War I, the British Empire controlled about 25% of the planet's land and people. The sun literally never set on it. But by the end of the war, Britain owed 850% of its GDP in debt, mostly to the United States. During the 1920s, the pound tried to stay on the gold standard, but the empire's finances were stretched thin. By World War II, Britain was spending more money every day than it had in the bank. In 1945, when the war ended, the empire was done. The colonies broke away, and the United States replaced Britain as the global financial power. Even the empire, where the sun never set, ran out of money before it ran out of sunlight. Across the ocean, America learned from that. For a while, after World War II, the US dollar became the world's reserve currency. The Bretton Woods system linked global currencies to the dollar, and the dollar to gold at $35 per ounce. But in the 1960s, something familiar started happening. Too much spending, the Vietnam War, the space race, and massive domestic programs. By 1971, the United States had printed so many dollars that foreign countries started demanding gold instead. President Nixon responded by saying, basically, nah! He closed the gold window, ending the gold standard. Inflation exploded. In 1974, US inflation hit 12%. Oil prices quadrupled, and the phrase stagflation was born. The US did not collapse, but it did show the same pattern. Every empire pushes its finances until the system cracks. Here is the interesting part. Economists have a name for this. It is called the imperial overstretch. Historian Paul Kennedy used it to describe how great powers spend more and more on military and prestige until their economy cannot keep up. Rome did it. Spain did it. France, Britain, the Soviet Union all did it. The Soviet example is wild in the 1980s. The USSR was spending up to 25% of its GDP on the military. Imagine if the US did that today. It would be over $6 trillion a year. Meanwhile, stores in Moscow were empty. People waited hours for bread, and oil prices, their main source of income, collapsed. By 1991, the Soviet Union dissolved. The nukes stayed, but the money disappeared. Every empire believes it is different, that the rules of economics do not apply to them, but history keeps cashing the same check. Now, let us zoom out and look for a pattern. Every empire starts with productivity. Farmers, traders, builders. Wealth is created by people making things. Then comes conquest, taking things. Then comes administration, managing things. Then luxury, spending things. And finally, decline, losing things. The funny part, during the decline, everyone still believes the empire is eternal. In Rome, citizens complained about prices but still attended the Colosseum. In 18th century France, nobles hosted lavish balls right up to the Revolution. In 19,980s Moscow, people still sang patriotic songs while standing in line for toilet paper. When the economy crumbles, the culture usually follows, not the other way around. Let us throw in a number. Historian Peter Turchin studied 30 major civilizations and found that financial crises tend to hit about 250 years after a state forms. Right around the time elites start multiplying faster than wealth. He calls it elite overproduction. Too many powerful people chasing too few resources. Sound familiar now, before you think this is all doom and gloom. Remember, collapse is not the end. It is the reset button. After Rome fell, Europe eventually reinvented itself through trade, innovation, and banking. After the British Empire, global finance evolved into multinational capitalism. The US itself, even after financial crises, keeps adapting. For now, but the warning signs, they always rhyme. High debt inflation, overspending on defense, social inequality, corruption. Declining trust in money. Every great empire obituary could start the same way. They thought they were too rich to fail, the Roman historian Tacitus once wrote. The more corrupt the state, the more it legislates. In modern terms, the more broke you are, the more rules you make to hide it. There is also psychology here. Power makes nations believe they can borrow forever. In 1790, the US debt was about $75 million. In 2025, it is over $34 trillion. That is an increase of 45 million%. Even Rome would be impressed. Empires do not die in battlefields. They die in balance sheets. And often it is not foreign enemies who destroy them. It is their own accounting departments. The real fall happens quietly, when coins lose trust, when salaries cannot be paid, when citizens start hoarding instead of building. Money is not just metal or paper. It is belief. When that belief fades, empires fade with it. Let me put it this way. No empire has ever survived its own inflation. None. Rome, Spain, France, Britain, the Soviets, all inflated themselves into collapse. It is like overeating success until you choke on it. So what does that mean for us today? We live in a global system where every empire, financial, digital, or military, runs on credit. The average global debt to GDP ratio hit 336% in 2023. That means there are more than $3 of debt for every dollar of actual production. History suggests that is the danger zone, because when confidence slips, it all unwinds, fast. But before you panic, remember, people always find a way to rebuild after all. The fall of one empire is usually just the funding round for the next one. So maybe, someday, historians will look back at us, the digital empire, and say they fell when their data became more valuable than their currency. Who knows? Until then, the pattern remains. Every empire spends its glory before it earns it, and every fall of power begins with a fall of value. So the next time someone says, money is not everything, Just remember, history disagrees. And that, my fellow economists, is why empires always go broke before they fall. Thank you for watching Money Law. I am Professor Coinstein, reminding you that history does not repeat, but your bank balance might.